These days, when folks think about prepping, they reach for bug-out bags, tactical stoves, or maybe some high-tech water filters. But you know, survival back in the medieval world was all about skills, not gadgets. Ordinary peasants faced war, famine, and those endless winters with nothing but their own ingenuity. The astonishing part, really, is that many of their methods are not only still viable today, but honestly, often better than what modern survival gear can offer. These aren't just romantic myths. These are hard-tested techniques, recorded in monastic texts, medieval farming calendars, and handed down through generations. So, for the next several minutes, let's break down 12 survival skills our ancestors relied on, showing exactly how they worked and, well, how modern preppers can bring them back in really practical ways. Root cellars? Now, those were the medieval refrigerator. Peasants simply couldn't afford to let food go bad. They dug cellars beneath their cottages or right into the hillsides, where stable temperatures kept the crops edible. Records from the husbandry of Walter of Henley, 13th century, mention burying turnips and carrots in clamps of straw and earth. Apples, too, were layered in straw and stacked in cool cellars, sometimes lasting all the way until the spring fairs. Modern preppers, you know, can recreate this with a hand-dug pit lined with stone or even barrels sunk down in the earth. The main thing is airflow to keep rot at bay and just enough moisture to stop everything from shriveling up. A well-built root cellar, honestly, stabilizes your food stocks without using a single watt of electricity. Fermentation supplied vitamins and stored calories. Now, you might be surprised to learn that sauerkraut wasn't actually invented in Germany. Its medieval roots stretch back even further. Monastic brewers, whose records still survive in abbey archives, fermented cabbage, grains and milk. And, well, the 12th century medical text Tarquinum Sanitatis describes sauerkraut as strengthening digestion and warding off winter weakness. This really mattered because vitamin C deficiencies killed, plain and simple. Preppers today can learn to ferment with only crocks, salt and water. Just a few jars of sauerkraut, mead or kefir will inoculate the diet with living cultures, boost immunity, and keep nutrition flowing when fresh produce is long gone. Smokehouses and salting tables preserved meat, you know. Salt was so critical it actually shaped medieval trade routes. Herring, which was a staple of northern Europe, was salted and smoked in quantities large enough to feed entire towns. In the Domesday Book from 1086, salt houses are recorded as valuable assets, taxed as heavily as farmland. Peasants dug shallow pits, layered meat with salt, and hung it in smokehouses over slow-burning fires. Modern preppers can replicate this with a backyard smoke barrel or, just a simple salt brine. Done correctly, pork or fish will last for months without refrigeration. This is one of the few food preservation methods that still works with nothing but wood, salt and patience. Crop rotation kept land fertile without chemicals. Medieval Europe pioneered the three-field system. In 1 year, peasants sowed wheat in one field, barley or legumes in the second, and left the third fallow. The system was described in detail by Bishop Adelard of Corbie in the 9th century. It replenished nitrogen naturally through legumes long before synthetic fertilizers existed. Today's preppers can apply this by rotating beans, peas or clover through garden beds. Doing so revives soil and reduces pest pressure, ensuring crops remain sustainable even if fertilizers vanish from shelves. Ah, pottage, the survival meal of the poor. In medieval times, cookbooks like the Form of Cury from 1390 often mention it. This was a one-pot stew, simmering endlessly at the hearth. It was thickened with oats or barley and bulked out with whatever greens, beans or meat scraps were available. Quite the humble dish, wasn't it? You see, the brilliance of pottage lies in its flexibility. Grains and legumes would stretch scarce meat. Nutritionally, it provided carbohydrates, protein and fibre all in one pot. Nowadays, preppers should think along the same lines. Stockpile grains and legumes, then adapt with wild edibles, garden harvests or preserved meat. The lesson here is adaptability over luxury, wouldn't you agree? Foraging, now that filled the hunger gap. The medieval herbal, Physica, by Hildegard of Bingen from the 12th century, details dozens of wild foods, nettles for greens, acorns leached for flour, and sorrel boiled into broth. Peasants never relied solely on their gardens. They knew the surrounding woods and hedgerows like their own larders. Fascinating, isn't it? Modern preppers, you know, can actually learn to gather wild garlic, dandelion, chickweed and nuts. Books such as A Modern Herbal by Maud Grieve, published in 1931, but drawing on those old medieval traditions, give really detailed instructions. This skill honestly turns overlooked landscapes into backup food sources, just as it did for peasants back in the day. Herbal medicine, well, it pretty much replaced the pharmacy. Without doctors around, peasants turned to what they called leech books. The Leech Book of Bald from the 10th century describes using yarrow for wounds, garlic and honey for infection, and willow bark for pain relief. Monastic herb gardens, by the way, supplied the village with remedies for fevers, stomach troubles and childbirth. For today's preppers, learning even just a dozen herbs, like calendula for skin, peppermint for digestion, and chamomile for calming, provides a sort of working apothecary. Books like The Complete Herbal by Nicholas Culpeper, written in 1653 and based on earlier texts, make these remedies accessible even now. When the drugstores close, herbs, well, they step right back into their old role. Repair skills ensured nothing went to waste. A medieval family could not afford to throw anything away. Blacksmiths repaired iron, wives mended linen with darning, and cooperatives kept wooden barrels in circulation for decades. An account roll from 14th century Norfolk notes how even broken ploughshares were reforged rather than replaced. Preppers should take the same approach: sharpen tools, patch clothes, mend leather. These aren't quaint crafts, but the backbone of sustainability. The mindset of repair, not replace, is as crucial as any stockpile. Salt preservation was a survival cornerstone. Salt preserved herring, pork, cheese, and even vegetables. Villages near salt pans or mines grew wealthy from their control of it. In medieval England, peasants stored red herrings, that is, heavily salted fish, that kept for months and were traded across Europe. For preppers, the lesson is simple. Bulk salt is cheap today, but, you know, absolutely priceless in a crisis. With salt, a whole harvest can be preserved with nothing but a brine crock and a cool storage area. Community survival was stronger than individual survival. The medieval manor system, well, it really forced cooperation. Fields were ploughed in strips, harvests gathered in groups, and grain stored communally in tithe barns. Villages shared oxen, ploughs and tools, because honestly no one family could own them outright. Preppers often romanticize solitary survival, but actually history shows the opposite. Neighbours who share knowledge and resources outlast those who hoard. Even the smallest prepper network echoes the strength of a medieval village. Fire mastery was, you know, an everyday necessity back in the medieval times. A peasant family's hearth, well, it never went out. Each morning fire was rekindled from embers carefully banked in ash overnight. Fire-starting tools like flint, steel and charcloth were common household items long before matches came into play. For preppers, the takeaway here is redundancy. It's important to know several fire-starting methods, from ferro rods to bow drills, and of course always maintain dry tinder. In the medieval world, fire meant food, warmth and safety. Lose it and, well, survival just collapsed. Water security, it really shaped entire settlements. Castles, villages and monasteries were strategically built near springs, rivers and wells. The assize of bread and ale in the 13th century even regulated the water used in brewing to prevent contamination. Peasants often strained water through cloth, boiled it or flavoured it with herbs to mask any impurities. Today's preppers should, really consider adopting rain catchment and filtration. A ceramic filter or a charcoal-packed barrel actually does a great job of replicating the cloth and sand filters of the medieval period. Access to safe water was quite literally a matter of life or death back then, and honestly it remains so now. The medieval mindset is, in my opinion, the real survival tool. What ties all these skills together is, mindset. Medieval peasants did not waste, did not rely on fragile systems, and certainly did not expect comfort. They worked with the land, stored food creatively, and healed themselves with whatever was at hand. Theirs was not just survival, it was true endurance. For modern preppers, rediscovering these skills is, honestly, more than just historical curiosity. It's a proper roadmap to resilience. Root cellars, herbal remedies, foraging, community ties, these are, believe it or not, as relevant in 2025 as they were in 1025. If you want more history-powered survival wisdom, do consider subscribing to Backyard Wisdom and sharing this guide with fellow enthusiasts. The forgotten genius of the medieval world still has, I'd say, the power to strengthen us today.